Hey guys, welcome to episode 35 of the 1023 Soul Shop Talk podcast. Today is going to be our first full episode of automotive news, and we're going to make an attempt at trying to get this done without issues. We spent the last hour having technical issues, as is usual.
As usual.
Happens every time. Turns out getting a lot of nice equipment and somewhat knowing how to use it doesn't guarantee it's going to work. And there's a lot more points of failure
when you need it.
Yeah, when you actually need it to work. But we're going to be covering some automotive news topics. And another thing, I have said pretty much this whole time that I didn't want to run ads on our podcast, and I still don't want to. It's not going to happen. For now, at least. That may change someday. But what I am doing is I'll start including affiliate links for stuff that we use and we really like not a sponsorship of the podcast by any means, just stuff that we appreciate. So there'll be affiliate links down below. That
helps us do business.
Yeah. Specifically, I'm going to add one for Vonage, which is a VoIP, a voice over internet service that we use for our business, and it's really, really nice. It's not that expensive and has a ton of really, really good business features. Whether you're tiny company and pretty much could scale to whatever you want, but they're really easy to work with, and it's VoIP stuff is not necessarily a guarantee to be simple. It's pretty complicated, but they make it pretty simple. So if you run a business, a small business or a large business, I would check out Vonage, and there's a link for that below. And if you end up buying from them with that link, then we might get $2. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. Getting into the new stuff, I guess I kind of wanted to just say that hopefully people will follow along. This is all kind of new. I mean, we follow news and have for a very, 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 very long time, in all kinds of different types of communities. So try my best to be as accurate as I can and give you as much info and try to follow along the stories. Spent quite a bit of time as we went through these stories trying to get more information than just the headlines. And yeah, hopefully if anybody has any concerns or questions about what we're bringing them, they'll follow along with the articles that we're talking about.
Because, all of the articles will be linked down below in the description. Awesome. And if you're watching on YouTube, I'm going to be screen sharing too, so you can kind of follow along with what we're reading. That is if everything stops reloading. So the other problem is Vaughn and
I love it that you're leveraging existing.
That's one more technical problem.
That's exactly what happened 10 minutes ago.
This video keeps playing whenever the screen reloads, but it keeps reloading. Vaughn and I talk about this, went through these articles. We've literally talked for hours about these articles, and so it's almost hard to go back and recover everything we've already said, but I'll try. One thing I want to cover first is sort of a misunderstanding that I think some people have is this podcast, like all of our videos and everything that we've produced to help with the 7.3 community, it's all free. We don't charge anything for it, obviously, and you're welcome to just take that information and go buy your stuff wherever you want. That's fine. But it is interesting. We had a guy that left a review on iTunes, on our on iTunes, the Apple podcast platform, and I just want to address it. He left a 1-star review and said he's disappointed in our customer service. He said, I listened to this guy for a little while to where I wanted to buy parts from him. He refused to do business with me because of where I live. I just wish a simple, we can't ship there was said, but to say, I don't do any business there and I don't support anyone who drives a truck there is a little over the top. Now, why that justifies a 1-star review, I don't really know. But the thing is, I need to be very clear with people. I'm assuming he's talking about California. We don't do business in California. And I specifically tell people, not we don't ship to California or whatever, we don't ship to California. And it's true, we can't ship there. And we also cannot support trucks that are intended to be used there because it's illegal. I cannot do that legally. That's the problem. It's not that I'm just being a dick. I just can't do it. So, and I need to be very clear with that. And with both points being it's important to understand that it's for trucks that are intended to be used there. Otherwise, like people like try to buy tuning, they'll see that we won't like support California, and so they'll just use a different address or something, and then call us back later and be like, "Well, I'm in California," and then we have to deny you service because we can't support it. So we're not trying to be mean, just legally that's what we have to do. So I just wanted to kind of clear that up.
We have to defend ourselves.
Yeah. All right. First news topic. What are we doing first?
So, I mean, I guess we might as well go in order. I guess I'm kind of prepared for that. So that's where we started, and I think that probably makes the most sense. Unless you want to kind of cover the stories that, I mean, we can put out there that aren't as detailed.
Yeah, let's start with the chip shortages.
Start the chip shortages? All right. So this article originally comes from Fox Business, as a handful of others did. So if you want to go ahead and read the title.
So Ford says chip shortage will force it to halt or cut production in 8 plants. Subheading: the announcement by the major U.S. automaker continued a series of supply chain setbacks that have affected the nation's economy in recent months.
So actually, that other link that I sent you is exactly the same information. It was just worded slightly differently from Autoblog. But yeah, so Ford basically is saying that because of their chip shortage that's happening, which we'll get into a little bit, that they're expecting to close down 8 plants, or production at least at 8 plants. I don't think they plan on actually closing them.
Yeah.
But they're explicitly saying that they scaled back the F-150 productions, and I guess they felt like they had to say it because they're the most popular vehicles that they produce.
Yeah, well, I mean, F-150s were last year were really bad, like 2021. I think that F-150s, that was the one that had the most, at least the most news around it of, like, what was it? Like, it was a stadium or something like that they filled, like, they bought like many acres and just like filled it full of trucks waiting for PCMs.
Really? Gotcha. No, I hadn't actually followed that. I had no idea.
Yeah.
But basically, yeah, they're trying to blame this on the global chip shortage. Well, I shouldn't say trying. I mean, it is true, right? That is the case. But one of the biggest things that I kind of found in this, that I found a little bit just interesting, was that the United States government had stopped any U.S. companies, from what I understand, and we have articles to this linking this, transactions or purchases between a company that's what is it called? I keep forgetting it. SMIC, I think. Is that right?
Which article are you looking at?
Yeah, SMIC.
Yeah.
So this company SMIC is headquartered in Shanghai, and they're a humongous fabricator for semiconductors. So they actually, I believe, it's some humongous number of silicon production from lots of companies across the world, not just US, source their components. Even like US based companies, they don't have their foundries anymore. This company produces them. So they had actually stopped US based businesses from being able to purchase semiconductors from them through a lot of COVID based stuff, and you can read all up on that. But so producers like Ford, manufacturers, like Ford, were not able to purchase chips from them. And I shouldn't say from Ford, because chances are, I mean, I know I can't remember the time where they actually stopped manufacturing electronic equipment that relied on bare semiconductors. Mm. I don't think they have that anymore. So it's coming from other companies, like third companies that design technology, such as like Intel. Not anymore, but I'm just using from a time period, saying like the 80s and 90s. Where a lot of companies were manufacturing electronic components, but they weren't actually manufacturing the silicon in-house. So their foundries, they would have other companies either purchase the licensing or they would sell the production of the silicon to companies that it made more sense for them to develop it. And specifically, like I'm going to talk about Global Foundries here in a second, which is exactly what AMD Advanced Micro Devices did in 2008, where they no longer produce their semiconductor in their own facilities or even by their own company. They're produced by Global Foundries. And so a lot of companies do that and have done it for a long time. So that means that if you're purchasing a product from, say, Advanced Micro Devices, AMD, chances are it wasn't actually, the technologies were developed by them, but it wasn't actually, the silicon was not manufactured by their own facilities or by that company.
Yeah.
So that means that there are a lot of stages that chances are Ford aren't buying directly from them. I don't know that for sure. I can't find any information on that, but chances are they aren't. And I think that's changing to some degree. Like I had mentioned, Global Foundries, there's an article we have from back in November, I believe. It's called Ford Global Foundries Partnering Up to Boost Chip Supply. It's on Autoblog here as well. And like I said, this is back in November. They had announced they're allocating quite a bit of money to start working directly with Global Foundries. And again, they're a foundry, so they're going to be producing silicon. So I think I may be wrong in saying that I don't think they do it anymore. Or if I am right, they're going to start doing it again.
Yeah, I actually hadn't seen this article. The Feds threatened defense law to get to the bottom of the chip shortage. I was just reading through that while you were talking.
Yeah, so we'll get into that in a second. I guess let's finish this off here with the Global Foundries. So, point being is, at some point, the U.S. government stopped people from being able, or companies from being able to purchase silicon directly. So whether that be integrators, whether that be other technology manufacturers, like such as Intel, and that's just coming off the top of my head. I don't actually know anymore. There's tons of them, I'm sure. Where they manufacture the technology, but they're not manufacturing the silicon. And now they're not allowed to buy or purchase the silicon from these particular companies with their technology incorporated.
Gotcha.
And certain companies like Ford here are going to be switching to using Global Foundries. I don't know if this is going to be directly. Honestly, I think it would make more sense for them not to deal with it directly. Just so happens to be their technology partners are going to be using Global Foundries, and Ford is granting them the money to do that. Yeah. From what it looks like. So anyway, I think that's just important to note that this chip shortage, there's a lot of complex moving parts that are causing it, and it's a really, really complex topic. But one of the biggest problems here happens to be that this company is capable of producing this technology, but it's not being allowed to be purchased because the federal government said so.
They would never.
So then, I included the article. Where is it? Yeah, another Autoblog article. I happen to find these all under the same topic. So this is actually, again, from September in 2021. The topic is that the headline is Feds Threaten Defense Law to Get to the Bottom of Chip Shortage. And I'll just read the first top here where it says, the Biden administration is considering invoking a Cold War era national security law to force companies in the semiconductor supply chain to provide information on inventory and sales of chips, Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo said Thursday. So I know this is mostly just a headline, but there is a good amount of information here where they're invoking an executive order. I believe it's part of an executive order that was released. I may be confusing that, but I don't think so. Where they're trying to investigate, or they want to make companies provide information on their inventory of quote-unquote chips and sales of chips. So I think that's a really broad topic, and I know that's just what the blog here is using. Yeah. It's not a direct quote. But is this... Yeah, so this is something the Commerce Secretary also said. This is a quote. What I told them is, I do not want to have to do anything compulsory, but if they don't comply, then they'll leave me no choice, she said. I said today we're having this as quote, we're evaluating all of our options right now and all of the tools. I hope not to go there, but we need to see some progress and we definitely need to see compliance. So that's all fairly scary words.
Yeah.
But I think it's interesting to say the least that the Commerce Secretary wants companies who may be quote unquote hoarding chips. And that wasn't a quote, sorry, that was just making a point in saying that I think this is boiling down to if what they consider hoarding chips, we don't want to have to resort to forcing you to comply to give us this information. But we need to make sure that you're not hoarding stock of chips because everybody needs to have their chips.
So is there not like a lot of government oversight on this anyway? I mean, has there not been in the past?
Well, as far as I don't know the exact ins and outs of this, but I know I have come across in technology, exchanging borders for quite a long time has been a fairly complicated process. So if you have any technology that you want to be manufactured outside of the US, you have to submit a compliance report or some report about your technology to the federal government saying that we intend to use this in the US. Here's my specifications for it. We're purchasing it from this company. Here's all this information. The idea, I think the premise of that was no technology that is a US citizen's brain produced is supposed to leave the country, in the sense of like, I don't think if you're getting a component manufactured or some amount of product manufactured overseas, that it's supposed to be protected and that country can't use that technology themselves. They can't, so the copyright essentially goes across borders. But I think it also works the other way around too. So if you're importing technology from another country, there's a lot of compliance reports you have to have on that too. Again, I'm not in this industry, so I just have dabbled in this, but there is a lot of paperwork that has to happen if you want manufacturing done across seas, if you're a company wanting to develop technology.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. Just a little bit further down in the same article, it says, so the quote, there's allegations of certain consuming companies buying 2 or 3 times what they need and stockpiling. What is it? Raimondo said, I'm probably going to say that wrong. And suppliers say, well, we can't get an accurate handle on the demand signal because consumers are stockpiling. So we don't know what the accurate demand is. And then some consumers are saying, we can't get straight answers from suppliers. How come I was told that I could have X amount and now I'm being told that I can only have half of X? Hence why they're stockpiling, because they don't know how to predict it. So it kind of just seems like a really giant miscommunication in a massive industry, honestly.
I agree. I mean,
not that I hope the federal government gets more involved in things ever, but like, I feel like there does need to probably be some better communication because if they're all telling the truth, I mean, we're talking multi-billion-dollar companies. Right. So,
well, right. I think it depends who is hoarding it, right? Yeah. Because I mean, as a company, I think a lot of people could understand the idea of I want to be able to provide this stuff to my customers.
Yeah.
But if the problem becomes, and I mean, if this is what I perceive is how it's working, right? So if you're a technology company, you've been getting your components manufactured overseas. There's been a lot of issues, say, due to the virus, the pandemic, that whole situation. And then you have the compounding issue of you can't purchase from particular vendors. And I know it's not just SMIC. There are plenty of others that they stopped trade routes with between U.S. companies. But if you just now no longer, because the federal government said you cannot source your technology from these companies, or you cannot have them manufacture it for you, good luck. I can imagine one of your first steps may be hoarding as much equipment and technology as you can.
Yeah.
Right. Again, assuming this is all honest, and we're not missing anything here as far as maybe there's a reason that trade stopped, or maybe there are other companies that have tried to start foundries that we're just missing.
Yeah, and like I don't claim to understand big business like this, and a lot of it takes a lot of lawyers, of course, but like at the end of the day, like if you run a business and you need to be able to supply to a massive amount of people, and you have the funding to do it, like, why wouldn't you want to be stockpiled when you see like impending doom? I mean, it makes sense why people do it, but it's just like the toilet paper in early 2020. if
Yeah.
everybody buys more than they need, then the other people don't have any. So
Right. Well, and then that I think is the very clear definition of communication problem, right?
Yeah.
Did it make sense for everybody to go do that? So the rest of us, we didn't really think that was a big deal until we didn't have any toilet paper, and then like, oh, that's a big deal.
Yeah, and maybe there wasn't ever a problem with toilet paper. Maybe somebody just said there was going to be a problem, so everybody bought more than was expected, and so the supply chain couldn't keep up.
Well, let's not go into that. Point being, I think that's a very clear example of this. I mean, this is not comparable at all because that's a consumer-based situation where it's not. Imagine if paper just was no longer to be imported. So, and I'm sure there's a lot that I'm missing here. This is just sort of, it's my opinion of what I think is happening here.
Yeah. What's next? Are we jumping down to the dealer markups?
I think so. Why not?
All right. Ford CEO Farley cracking down. Is it Farley or Farrell? Yeah, Farley. Ford CEO Farley cracking down hard on the $2.6 billion in dealer markups.
3.6 billion.
Yeah, 3.6 billion.
And so this is it's a fairly long article. Again, Fox Business. I couldn't really find a whole lot of info because it's mostly just quotes from the CEO here before they're breaking it down. I couldn't really find any information on where they were getting their numbers from. But yeah, so what they're saying here is, I guess it's probably worth just reading the first line here. During an automaker's earnings call Thursday night, the Ford CEO reiterated his commitment to eliminate unreasonable markups. And that's quoted. Some dealers have been charging amid the shortage of new vehicles. I don't think that's new. I mean, I'm not big into purchasing new vehicles or going to dealerships all that often, but I think most of us know that that's kind of the way things work. I mean, in general, it's supply and demand. Profit margin. Well, I think there's a lot of things, but I mean, if we're trying to say that the profit margin is the issue and then it's very arbitrary where their profits come from, and therefore we can determine that this is too much for a company to be making, right? I think that's where we differ on who should be allowed to say what a company can make. Yeah. As far as if you have a dealership and a dealership agreement, whether it's franchise based or however it works, I don't know how this works, but I'm sure there's a piece of paper agreement somewhere that if you're a Ford dealer, right, you have a certain range of how you can price things to be competitive and fair to the rest of the dealers. I would imagine it works similarly to parts that everybody deals with here, right? Like we do. But I think it's a little bit strange that he's determining what's unreasonable or what's unreasonable markups, and that's just the way that Fox here covered it. I think one of the biggest takeaways in this article was that, and I'm going to use a quote here just because I think I'm going to start with this quote. So this is what the CEO Farley said. This is quite an important topic because the margins that we want to build into BEV, which is battery electric vehicle, are gonna be heavily dependent on different go-to-market and customer experience. I interpreted that as they believe that a dealership markup is going to be unfavorable for electric vehicle sales, and let me explain. I think they want the buying experience to be modified for electric vehicles compared to, any other power source vehicle, and in the sense that they want it to be less, price gouging. And so my two takes on what this situation could be is, I don't know if in general across the board dealerships have been marking up their vehicles to have higher margins on them and electric vehicles to capitalize on this chip shortage, as what I think one take could be from what he's saying, as that dealerships have seen that they think because of a chip shortage, electric vehicles are going to be impacted much more difficult or much higher rather. Sorry. And I'm not saying that it isn't. I don't really know, but I think it's pretty. There isn't enough evidence to just say, oh, it's an electric vehicle, therefore chip shortage must equal less production capacity for electric vehicles. So we're going to raise the prices because it's supply and demand situation. Yeah. I think that's one side of it. But also, I think it's a bit strange for him to come out and say that this is important because we want the electric vehicle buying experience to be better, So we don't care what you do anywhere else, but we need to make sure that you're not price gouging people in electric vehicles, right? We need to make sure your profit margin is fixed from the top down on your electric vehicles because we want the electric vehicle buying experience. Which we don't have the evidence in this podcast to talk about why I think from top down there is an agenda, but I think to some degree it's possible to look at this as if there is a top down agenda to make sure that the electric vehicle buying experience is, I don't know, easier.
It doesn't really take, you're not speculating to say, like, we know that, the federal government's been making a really hard push for EVs. By I think it was 2030, they want, expecting and are pushing for like the majority of your personal commuting rigs to be EVs. And like, you're going to have a heck of a time as Ford trying to convince everyone to go EVs if the experience of purchasing one is rough. Like, I mean, I'm sure they're getting pushed pretty hard. They need to get EVs out into the market, and they don't want that to be a hassle.
And so I think that's right. I think that's one takeaway you can have from exclusively choosing to say this is a problem for electric vehicles, or it's important to understand this for electric vehicles only, and exclude everything else. To be fair, I haven't listened to his whole or read his whole statement, so I could be completely wrong on that, and I do apologize if I am. But I think it was pretty interesting because we kind of know the way things have been going, that I think that's sort of what makes sense here. Yeah. But it also could be very much so that it's just in general, Ford believes that there's a problem from the bottom up where dealerships are just charging significantly more than, I don't know, whatever their number analyst people decide is too much to make sales or something. So yeah.
And I'm sure there's some amount of regulation in that too, like what they can charge for vehicles.
Right. And I think beyond the government side of that, I'm sure there's enough of paperwork between the dealer and Ford themselves that would govern this, for sure.
If there's any representatives from Ford that happen to listen to this podcast and wants to chime in, we'd love to talk with you.
Oh yeah, for sure.
They said also the let's see here. I think it was Andrew Farrick had apparently sent a letter out to dealers back in January of 2021, stating that they could lose their allocation of F-150 Lightnings if they tried to get reservation holders to pay additional fees to place orders for an upcoming electric pickup. So again, fighting back on the EV side.
So if I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong taking away from what you just said, that they placed an embargo on dealerships' ability to purchase new F-150 Lightnings if they were planning on charging too much for them.
Yes, if they were planning to charge an additional fee to place the order for them to get a slot to get one, they had to charge the retail price. It sounds like the MSRP price. Then they also say
that doesn't sound abnormal.
Yeah, we've had but I mean, just specifically that it's on EVs. It's just kind of back to what you were saying earlier. It's also we've had what just happened? We've had very good knowledge of who they are. Speaking of the dealers, sorry, this thing keeps auto-playing. We have very good knowledge of who they are, and their future allocation of product will be directly impacted, says CEO Farley.
And at the bottom of the article, and we can just jump into that, what I thought was neat, right? That this isn't just happening at Ford, and it just so happens to be we found an article.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it's being covered. We found it because it's a U.S. company. So, General Motors president, this is a quote from the same article, Steve Carlisle, had sent a letter to dealers last month informing them that they may lose their allocations of overbooked EVs and the upcoming Corvette Z06 if they are, quote, tempted to profit off the current shortage. And this was the quote that Fox used was from Detroit Free Press. And I just thought it was interesting. Again, what I just quoted, or what I was just talking about a little bit ago, where they're if they intend to tempted to profit, which I mean, if you're not, you need to make a profit if you're selling anything, right? So, of course, that's a silly statement, and I get that it's kind of redundant to explain that, but I think it's pretty silly that that's even said in there as being a problem, stated as if it were a problem. Tempted to profit, of course they're going to profit. So anyway, but I thought it was neat to say that yes, overbooked EVs, of course, but they're going to potentially take away a dealer's ability to purchase the Z06 Corvettes. Yeah. I'm sure that's not the only thing, but I just thought it was a neat way of wording it, and it could just be the way Fox had grabbed it. But I think it was just a neat way of wording that, hey, if you tempted to make a profit on these products, it'd be a shame if something happened to these Corvettes you planned on selling.
Yeah, but I mean, like, how many Corvettes are you really selling to profit off of anyway? Like, in comparison to
sure not
amount of EVs
nearly as many as the other EVs that they're going to stop. It's if you plan on making too much money off these EVs, it'd be a shame if they fell off the ship and ended up in somebody else's dealership. That's how I read that.
Yeah.
Which I think is just a little bit, big business to say, if you're not going to listen to us because of this agreement that we made and you agreed to. Yeah. I'm sure. And I don't know this for sure, but I have a feeling this is probably a pretty good assumption where they're trying to get around the rules that they created an agreement for dealers to follow. And again, it'd be a shame if you didn't do what we wanted you to do, even though it's fully within your rights to do.
Yeah.
But I could be wrong.
So I had added a link to a Lamborghini article that was covering their kind of their stance on what their plans were for electric Lamborghinis, and it was a Reuters article, and it had a lot of good quotes from the CEO, and they changed the article, so it doesn't say what it used to say, and I'm not even going to include that. I just was looking through it, and it's totally not the same article anymore.
Well, I guess that probably explains why I looked at it. I didn't really have anything to say on it.
It literally isn't the same article. They rewrote it.
Well, yeah.
Basically, it was Lamborghini at that point in time. The quotes were saying that they were possibly going to, if they had to, halt production on all vehicles, and just determine whether it was worth building EVs or not. But they really hope they continue building their gasoline powered vehicles.
That's what it was. I remember you telling me about when you first had found this article and sent it to me.
Yeah, just doesn't say that anymore. Thanks, Reuters.
If I remember correctly, it was basically something along the lines of Lamborghini was like, we don't really want to make EVs because it's not what we do here.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This one, I think you had some stuff to add to this, but headline, what is it? Stellantis? Is that how you say that? Mm-hmm. Stellantis is recalling nearly 2,000 plug-in minivans for fire risks.
So, Stellantis, and I haven't researched this. I mean, it's just in this article. Other than it's a parent company to Chrysler.
Yeah.
I don't follow who owns Chrysler now, but I guess they do. And I don't remember how long it's been, so sorry if I sound like an idiot because I haven't really followed up on Chrysler. But
Stellantis is the company that was building the EV delivery vans for Amazon, right?
I don't know. That sounds familiar.
Pretty sure. I'll look it up while you cover your thing here.
Yeah. So this article specifically focuses on the 2017 to 2018 Chrysler Pacifica hybrid vehicles. And it says about 12 fires were reported, but it just so happened to be 20,000 were affected by this and they're being recalled, right? And basically the links, I guess I should explain, there isn't any direct information on exactly what the cause is right now, at least when this article was published and all of the extra research I did to corroborate this information. But their statement is they're advising owners to refrain from charging their vehicles and to park them away from structures and other vehicles, which is pretty difficult to do in most places, especially where you're likely to have a hybrid electric plug-in vehicle. So it says it's working to confirm the cause of the fire. And so
You know where how all the super juicers are all within about 10 feet of each other on one block.
Yeah, exactly. So NHTSA, National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, had received some what are they, tickets? I guess I don't know what exactly they're called, but reports. And so I'd found a couple of them. That one of the articles I had found had linked to it. But basically, it was just they've had problems. Yeah, may experience fire with the ignition in off mode. This is the description of the defect. This was in 2018, I think, is when this first report. So anyway, there's a handful of reports that were prompted an investigation from the NHTSA. Which is very common protocol, and so that's what I just wanted to get into, is that this happens all the time, and I just thought it was even more funny that with all different types of vehicles, and even more so with plenty of other companies, and it had reminded me, and I didn't know much info about it at the time, of the Ford problems in the F-150s and like most of the F-Series. I think Navigators, Expeditions, Excursions, I guess not all of them, but this is an NHTSA sort of like bulletin, where, and this is the summary, the quote of the summary here for this bulletin, that was, on certain sport utility vehicles and pickup trucks, the speed control deactivation switch may overheat, smoke, or burn. The consequence, this condition could lead to a fire. Fires have occurred while the vehicles were parked with the ignition in off. So, and most of us know, if we've been around Fords, know that the common fix for that, right, common recall replacement part is. And so then I was just interested, and so a handful of more articles had popped up on fairly like recent other problems, and this is nothing new. We just happened to catch it while we started doing the news, right? I guess is what I'm trying to say, is that this isn't anything special. It just so happens to be with an electric or hybrid set of vehicles. And it seemed to be significantly less than most of the others that we've found here. So I found one that ABC, it's an article from March of 2021, where GM recalled 10,000 Chevy and GMC vans due to fire risk. And yeah, I'm not sure if any of these even had... Yeah, the short circuits caused by contact between the positive battery cable and the fuse attachment post.
I mean...
Bad stuff.
Small detail.
It's different when it's like the cruise control thing, like it's a fairly small, it's just in a bad spot. Like there can't pass a lot of current. Yeah. But the positive battery cable is a pretty big deal, I think, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So anyway, I just thought it was important to note that this is not uncommon, and it just so happens to be with an electric or a hybrid vehicle. And if I'm not mistaken, I think there were also plenty of different Toyota hybrid models as well. But
yeah. I wanted to point out it was Rivian that was the one that's building Amazon's vans.
Got it. Yeah.
That's the company with some black marks already. Tesla's like, I guess like 100. There was like 180 employees that left Tesla that they knew. They took their trade secrets with them, and so Tesla was suing them for, I think it was several $1 billion for stealing trade secrets. And
is that what that contract? Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know. There's a bunch of silly stuff. Like they're claiming Tesla was like hacking them to spy on the employees. Dude, I don't know, man.
So anyway, I think if you want to, there's the NHTS a website has recalls for everything, and safety recall notices for everything. So if you have any concerns, if you have a vehicle for whatever reason that maybe, your commuter or whatever, and you're interested in that, you can find anything at any of these recalls for just about any vehicle that's used in the US that has reports.
Yeah.
NHTSA.gov/recalls. It's basically everything. And
the 20,000 vans just didn't mean much in the grand scheme of things.
Exactly. And nobody got hurt. So I'm going to laugh at this because I think it's just interesting. I think it's quite entertaining topic of problems that cause fairly catastrophic failures. And so you can just go to this website and you can find, punch in your VIN for your vehicle. And, I don't know. The fire ones are awful. And I'm sorry for anybody that's been affected by a vehicle fire. That was caused by a defect in the vehicle.
Yep.
But hopefully you weren't harmed and nothing else was harmed other than the loss of the vehicle. But I do find those types of problems quite funny.
There was an article or a towing company that I had seen that posted about like their regulation on like how they have to store wrecked electric vehicles. And I hadn't thought to add that to this, but they were saying that, let's see if I can find the info here. Apparently it's incredibly difficult. Like, there's a ton of regulation on how they have to haul and store them in case they blow up and catch on fire, and for quite some time. And so in this thing, they were saying they can, let's see here. The vehicle must stay in gear and emergency brake must be on at the same time. If it doesn't, you could charge up the batteries and cause a thermal runaway, catching the vehicles on fire. Let's see. They had when storing wrecked EVs, you have to have a minimum of 50 feet all the way around the car. And that's about a half an acre for one vehicle, is what they're saying. So, I mean, I don't know if you've seen wrecking yards, but usually you have them like basically stacked on top of each other. Like the amount of land that would take up just in case like one catches on fire, it doesn't blow up another one next to it. That's insane. Yeah. Apparently there's a ton of regulation on it and it sounds horrid to have to deal with.
I agree. I feel like there's probably much better ways, and I'm not in this industry. This is just me speculating, but I feel like there's much better ways to eliminate those types of threats of like, if there's a way to salvage the dangerous components from those vehicles. And I imagine that hybrid stuff is pretty even more complicated because there's probably a lot of different regulations when it comes to having the batteries along with fuel systems as well. So like flammable materials such as fuel systems. But
yeah,
we've had a lot of time to perfect that, or I shouldn't say perfect it, but come up with better ways to protect the vehicle after it's been wrecked, just to protect the driver and everything else.
Well, the thing is, you can like easily and cheaply dispose of fuel. Like that's not hard to do. Getting like
even in a wrecked vehicle
like,
too. Like,
yeah, like saving like getting the batteries out of a wrecked car that at any moment could go up in flames. That like the batteries are like part of the car, usually in the floor pan. That's not an easy job to do. And like this towing company, they had posted some pictures of it where they had to build like these big, so they had enough room for them. They built these like giant, like 2 foot thick concrete walls and pads around each car.
Wow. It's
horrible, man. They said they have to go out every day, every 30 minutes. Sorry, they go out every 3 times a day to check on the batteries with a what is it called? A thermal camera to make sure that they're not heating up.
Wow.
Apparently, too, this is the next thing is storing this vehicle is a ticking time bomb, because if it catches fire, it can take up to 2 hours and 5,000 to 6,000 gallons of water to put it out. A gasoline vehicle might take 25 to 30 minutes and about 500 gallons of water and foam.
That's amazing.
So apparently they have to have that on hand. They have to have that much water on hand for each vehicle legally.
Right. Wow.
That's insanity.
Yeah, that sounds a lot to cope with.
The untalked about consequences.
I think that's going to be with everything. I mean, if we could go back in time with just the emerge of even gasoline powered vehicles.
Oh yeah.
I'm sure this isn't new, right? At least that's my opinion of it. But as far as how easy things have gotten to maintain this kind of, maintain gasoline powered vehicles, how safe they've become in the sense of, lots of regulations that have put restrictions on fuel systems to the point of like even having a fuel tank in a specific position such that depending on the accident, it will be unharmed or, for the most part, won't cause any problems. Like every part on a vehicle has to be in a specific position and crash tested, that kind of stuff. So I just don't think we've had time to do that with electric vehicles in the same way. So I just think that's going to take a lot of time to get to that point.
Yeah. Next up, we've got the U.S. Department of Energy to provide about $3 billion to boost production of advanced batteries. Now, what's interesting here, I know you had their actual statement, but the department, this is what a quote from their statement says: the department intends to fund battery materials refining and production plants, battery cell and pack manufacturing facilities and recycling facilities to create a good paying, clean energy jobs. Now, the interesting thing about all of what they're planning to fund is that none of it is funding the mining of the materials, which, to my knowledge, we still can't mine for lithium in the US, right?
I don't honestly know that. I think I would agree with you, but I don't honestly know.
Okay.
So I had included the article where this quote came from, which is officially from the energy.gov articles page. But this is their statement, which I always find interesting when it comes to like government like websites or agency websites where they always quote themselves in the third person.
Yeah.
But the U.S. Department of Energy, this is from the U.S. Department of Energy, today issued 2 notices of intent to provide $2.9 billion to boost production of the advanced batteries that are critical to rapidly growing clean energy industries of the future, including electric vehicles and energy storage, as directed by bipartisan infrastructure law. The department intends to fund battery materials refining and so this is the quote that you just read.
Yeah.
Production of batteries and all that fun stuff. So this is the finalization, I suppose, of the Executive Order 14017, which is, I guess the title of it, America's Supply Chains. So that was in June of 2021. So it was a 100-day review, which was where they're trying to, and they link that there. But where I guess they were trying to come up with justifications of pricing and allocation of funds. Yep. So they'd spent that executive order to determine how much they believed was necessary in the infrastructure law. So, yeah. So if you want to read up on that, I would suggest going straight to that website. Doesn't mean they're not going to change it. But the Reuters article, which is quoted everywhere, right? And I found no better information. It's 2 paragraphs, and really just one of them is the quote.
Yeah.
And dozens of websites were quite literally just quoting the quote, right? Or just quoting this article.
With zero information other than just reading the article, which we'll link down below.
Yes, and no links to the article itself.
Yeah.
Right? No links to, I assumed it was probably a press conference, a video, none of that. So I finally had found this somewhere buried on the internet under the energy.gov, because I'm sure it's not that highly ranked in search results.
Yeah.
But so if you actually want to read that at all, I would suggest going straight there and not just reading the headline.
Yeah.
But there is some more information on where the funds came from, where there's a 100-day review link that you can find, quote unquote, fact sheet from the White House website. So, yeah.
And then I was looking while you were talking there about like mining lithium in the U.S., which apparently isn't a thing. But I guess that there's like a huge deposits of lithium in Nevada. And I'm going to link to this article. I didn't read the whole thing while you were talking there. It's pretty long, but I just chuckle a tiny bit, and I'll include this. It says a rush to mine lithium in Nevada is putting climate activists and environmental groups against each other. It's like, yeah, imagine that. It's like, hey, mining lithium might not be the cleanest thing we can do, but you need lithium for your lithium cars.
Right.
So,
yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot more to that. But yeah, you're right. I mean, this is going to be a lot of conflicts. I mean, I think it's been that way for a very long time, considering the amount of water that's been pumped into the earth to get oil out of it, right? So there's always trade-offs, and so determining what was worse even now, right, considering it's still being done, right, to the point where now we actually just have to focus on getting the water out of the earth that can't be clean. It's not clean water. It can't be reused in its current state. So, like, there's a lot here. I agree with you. I find it entertaining, but at the same time, like there's so many other places to look for the exact same problems, you know?
It makes my blue pill left brain a little bit happy though. So,
well, anyway, one other thing that I just want to make a joke about was the Department of Energy had made like a video that was a nonsense video in the sense of like, and I don't even know if I recommend watching it because it was just a bunch of statements on like a colorful screens like you'd see on a commercial or something. There was obviously no information in it, but they had to make like a, press video, whatever. And as of today, it was published on the 11th of February, and today I believe is the 21st of February.
yeah.
So in 10 days, it has 732 views. So I just
Yeah.
and we can't see the dislikes anymore on YouTube.
Bring back YouTube dislikes.
It's there, but I can't imagine people that are using that are actually disliking it. So 20 likes and no idea how many dislikes it actually has. So anyway, out of the 732 views of a video that made no sense to publish, and I don't think, Lord knows how much we paid for that video, but
Yeah, I love. I don't even know how to say that. I love your notes, like the DOE propaganda video link.
yeah, I don't want to say that because it's not true. I wouldn't call it a propaganda video.
It just
But,
you misspelled it. It was autocorrect. GM to invest $6.5 billion for EV battery production facilities in Michigan. And the funny thing about these articles, this again, I found lots of articles and it was basically all just a quote. I don't even know where the original was, but this is on the Teslarati news website. They're basically all saying the same thing, which is absolutely nothing. That they're saying they might maybe think about it, and they said that in a press conference, and they're not actually doing it. But there's lots and lots of articles saying that they're going to. Maybe.
So I don't have a whole lot of information. I don't think this article there was enough talking points in this other than they're trying to get something out of the state of Michigan to bring back jobs. So I imagine they're trying to get some influence in the state and trying to get some state money for it. That's just my assumption. Don't actually know that. But that's kind of what it seems like this. They're having conferences with the governor to talk about this. I'm not sure why that's necessary. If you plan on doing it, just start it. I'm not sure why you need to get the state involved with those, unless there's something I'm missing of like why they need to get them involved so they can build it.
Well,
but I don't imagine that that's much of a roadblock.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, this happened. The announcement was like right before they had a meeting with the president, like several weeks ago, a month ago or whatever, about EVs and like trying to bolster production for electric vehicles in the U.S. It was like Ford and Chevy, and I think we're the only ones that were there. But it was.
Oh yeah, I think I remember you telling me about that.
Yeah.
The only thing I did want to take away from it is that as far as my major concern, obviously, naturally, is where federal tax dollars, right? All of your federal taxes get wrapped up into and where that's going, right? But GM recently received $1.3 billion in an approved tax rebate for the Orion assembly plant. That's a quote from the article. However, that's
over a quarter of the price of the plant they got in tax credits.
So what I had took away from that when I did some more research on exactly where that was coming from, of where I think something was getting missed here, right? They didn't get 1.3 billion in taxes or tax money or tax break or rebate for this assembly plant. And there's more on that assembly plant I was going to talk about, but I don't think it's worth talking about it. But it was a rebate that was calculated based on the 1.3 billion they spent, I believe, to build this plant. So it was just considered a rebate because they did something good, so they want to get money back for it. So it's not actually 1.3 billion they're getting back.
It's a rebate based on that amount. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I gotcha.
But they're trying to say that the total investment is expected to reach $4 billion, according to a report from Detroit News.
Now, this is a good one. We'll wrap this up here. There's lots of articles about it, and I don't know if the one I found here was a very good one. But Mazda owners say that an NPR radio signal is bricking their infotainment systems. This is actually kind of awesome.
So I'd actually, in this article, if you go down to the second paragraph, GeekWire,
Yeah.
I felt like they did a little bit better job at explaining some of it. It was definitely more entertaining.
Yeah.
But,
It's worth reading these articles, and I'll link them both down below here. But essentially, in Seattle, there was an NPR radio station that when they're broadcasting, like how you get your and you know the technical side is better than me, so you can correct me if I'm wrong.
Mhm.
But when you're getting your stream for your audio, if there's like title
this
covers,
was FM radio.
yeah, FM radio. When you're getting your stream
HD.
for your title covers, like the images, they're streamed with the audio on HD radio. And what was happening was they were streaming the title covers from this specific station. It was actually from a third party that streamed it for them, but they were streaming the images without a file extension, so they weren't like named like .png or .jpeg or whatever. I'm not sure what the format typically is. And essentially, the radio had no idea what to do with that blob that came in. It didn't know what to do with that without an extension. And so it was like essentially crashing the infotainment systems in a way that they would just go into a boot loop and they couldn't get back out of it. And apparently it's over CAN bus. There's no way to like directly access the infotainment systems. There's no way to like reset them. And so that they have to be replaced.
Yeah. So I just want to say before anybody, this blob is actually a fairly correct term. I'm not sure if they would use it in this type of scenario, but blob is binary large object.
Yeah.
Pretty common terminology. But yeah, so it was a Mazda. If you had a Mazda built between 2014 and 2017 and you lived in this area, HD radio, I don't know of any others types, but HD radio specifically over FM is a digital broadcast. I don't know all of the formats that it's used, but it's it's over the same frequencies, but there are different ranges of how it gets transmitted, and so there's a bit of like negotiation that can happen with the radio. If you have an HD capable radio, you can listen to that digital stream.
Yeah.
And there's extra information that gets passed with that. So in the article that I found, there was a lot of people, I believe this culminated on Reddit. And so the information that I had found on it, more detailed of exactly what the issue was, were just speculations. So they weren't actually, any of the people that I found researching this weren't actually capable of pulling the source code from anything, or even like binaries and trying to disassemble them and decompile them.
Yeah.
But there were some people that sort of speculated and believed that exactly this is what happened, and so they came up with some mock-ups, right, or some they came up with something with the ability to recreate the issue without actually knowing what the problem in the firmware or source code was. So yeah. I imagine these are fairly high level computers, so what he was saying was probably fairly accurate. He was using like GCC desktop operating system based stuff. So let's say operating system of a Linux type, which is fairly accurate these days. I think it's probably fairly accurate in these systems. Yeah. But that's a fairly high level operating system to operate. So I don't know if exactly is true, and that they may even been using a non-specialized compiler such as GCC to build it. But he built a replication based on GCC, and it just happened to be, he describes it, what he believes to be as a segmentation fault, which is where you have a pointer value that will get set to a value that may dereference memory outside, or ask the processor to reference memory outside of your process's allocated memory space. And it, by default, on an operating system that has, on a managed operating system computer, the processor will have a fault, an interrupt, a trap that the operating system will manage. So it's a pretty normal where your application will just crash and the operating system can take over, move your application off the processor, and you can go back to normal operations and then respond with an error code. It doesn't affect the rest of the system. In lower level computing devices where you don't have that type of operating system overhead, segmentation faults can't exist because there is no virtual memory.
Yeah.
So interesting, and it just happens to be a function of the printf that he used in the standard library. So for GNU standard library, and it just happens to be a very special character that will measure the size of the buffer during the printf sequence, and then it'll spit the result out of that buffer after it was put together. And it from his information, it believes to just dereference an invalid memory address. So
yeah, if you're interested in seeing that, the proof of concept or whatever that the guy put together, we'll link that GitHub project in the description too.
That's the word I was missing. Thank you.
Yeah.
The phrase proof of concept. So yeah, just that if you had HD radio enabled, your radio, your multimedia unit would get stuck on this station, and there's nothing you could do about it.
Yeah, you're just an infinite boot loop with NPR coming back online for a moment.
Yeah,
imagine,
if I'm not mistaken, I didn't read this whole article, but I believe that like you could only listen to that, and if you tried to get away from it or restart it, that was the problem. Like you couldn't.
Well, imagine, I mean, I can't imagine that this is like the first time this has happened. Like I'm sure of all the stations and everything out there that like this bug has happened before, and they probably just chalk it up to like just a failed unit of some kind, and it never got diagnosed until it happened in somewhere like Seattle for a long enough period of time. There was like a mass consequence. But like, it's funny, the quotes from some of the dealers are like saying that it like, well, it could just be because of the switch to 5G. It's like, that's not how this works. Makes you laugh a little bit.
Yeah.
All right.
I can completely understand, like I was telling Dusty earlier, where somebody asked, right? The only reason these people knew, they were calling dealerships to get their responses on what they think was going on, or, you know, so it was just asking people that worked at the dealerships what their thoughts were on it.
Yeah.
And just that one of them could have been, it's 5G, man. I don't know.
Well, we're right up at an hour here. I do want to cover one more thing. If you're listening on YouTube, you'll see that like the last couple Mondays and going forward the next like 8 Mondays or so, we're going to be uploading an episode every week that's an old episode. So make sure to look at them. The ones that are going up on Monday they're going to be like old episodes catching up, because we didn't start posting the podcast on YouTube until we did a couple of early ones, and then the rest of them were like from like episode 12 and up. So we're getting all of the old stuff that wasn't posted put up, and we're just releasing them over time. So the one that went up this week, which would have been on the 21st of February, was from a year and a half, almost 2 years ago, when we were working on building the tuning library that was online. And I'm sure some of you can remember that was episode 6. And a lot of people were getting excited about it. And I just want to point out, like, something like that someday will probably happen, but it got nixed for a myriad of reasons, of which we don't have time to talk about right now. Maybe we can cover that again in another episode. So just know we're not building the instant tuning library online. Well, for now, it's on hold.
Not right now.
Yeah, it's on hold. Okay, that about sums it up. If you guys want to check these articles out, they're all going to be linked down below. If you enjoyed the podcast, leave us a comment. If you're on YouTube, drop a comment on there. If you're on Apple Podcast, leave us a comment there. Just make sure you fully understand before you leave us a 1-star review why it would be. You can check out the affiliate link I mentioned too if you have a small business for Vonage, if you're looking for a VoIP system. Again, we're not making a ton of money on the fact that it's there, and they're not sponsoring it, but we really appreciate Vonage in our business. Now we know how to use it. We use it every day, and it makes our life a lot easier.
There's probably a lot of other tools that may be able to help that we've found, just because this is what we do all day, that may be able to help. So if anybody has any ideas on what we use for this and that, maybe we could answer that. But if not, you also have the opposite. You could provide tools that we may use because you're a medium, small, or large business. Sure, I'll take them. Yeah, for sure. And like I mentioned earlier too, we are more than happy if anybody on here is like works for Ford or has like information, or any one of these auto manufacturers about kind of like that side of the world, the production or dealership side. I'd love to chat with you. I like having conversations with people about anything that's interesting in this field. So appreciate you guys listening. If you have anything you want us to cover, feel free to send us an email to media@1023.com. Also, if you see any interesting articles you want us to cover too on our news segments, make sure to send us an email there. Again, it's media@
1023diesel.com. I've been Dusty.
I've been Vaughn.
See ya.